Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Calla. We have a very special guest for you today, Cary Daniel. Cary is a strategic coach, a growth advisor, and a staffing franchise expert. With more than 20 years as an entrepreneurial veteran, Cary Daniel has been involved in every aspect of running a successful organization, having taken a startup company to over 100 million in revenue in under 10 years, and having led his business to the Inc. 5000 and the Inc. 500 list 6 times. This puts Mr. Daniel in an elite class of entrepreneurship. Cary has also held ownership in over 20 private ventures and has been involved in over 24 merger and acquisition transactions. Since 2004, Cary has held the position of co-founder and CEO of the franchise Nextaff, a temporary employment franchise opportunity. So, Cary, I want to talk about entrepreneurship because oftentimes people confuse entrepreneurship and franchising, and there is a distinction. So I have a love for both, and I know you do too. So start us off there. What happened to have you just fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Sure. Well, I want to tell you, you did leave one thing out of my bio, and I need to correct that, where it says has been involved in every aspect of a successful, and I need to put an unsuccessful business. Because as you are well aware, the road of entrepreneurship is probably filled with more failures than successes. So as I hear that coming across, I need to update that so people don't think I've just skated through the last 25 years unscathed. But yeah, so you're talking about kind of the difference between entrepreneurship and franchising. You know, I guess for me, the biggest difference that I see is really on the very front end side, where I feel like the entrepreneur is somebody that is out there in more of a creation mode, somebody that either is creating something from scratch or taking a business model that they think they can do better, which was my case. I invent temporary staffing, but the companies I worked for, I didn't like the way that they were modeling their comp plans. I didn't like the way that they were, doing business, and I thought I could do it better. So either somebody that wants to build a better mousetrap or somebody that creates a whole new mousetrap to begin with.
Yeah.
But with that said, if you're building a better mousetrap, where does the franchise owner come in? They're taking that better mousetrap and launching with it. So I think that from maybe the day it starts going forward, it's very similar, right? You still have to have grit, determination, work ethic, people skills, leadership skills, capital. So the majority of the ingredients, I think, are very, very similar, with the one exception that the entrepreneur is kind of driving the idea and driving the vision initially. But once the rubber hits the road and you're selling and in our business recruiting and paying bills and working with insurance carriers, and it's very similar.
Wow.
So there's a lot of overlap. There is a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tracy, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was getting excited there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just thinking, hard work, grit, determination. So how important is a solid business plan in entrepreneurship? Especially when somebody's starting out and they think that they have like the greatest idea in the world. How important is a solid business plan?
Well, I think if you read the stats, it'll tell you that it's not very important. But I would say in my experience, I think what it helps you do is it helps you vet out some of the areas that maybe you haven't thought about. And, in kind of the prelim to this, we had discussed some of the academic approaches to business and kind of going down an academic route. And you just see some people that have very unrealistic expectations whether it's market size or penetration or that kind of thing. And I think the business plan does help you uncover some of that and really weed through it. But how many successful business owners do I know that had the master game plan marked out and their 5-year plan hit on the dot? Probably very few.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Years ago, I went to a TED talk on this very topic about business plans, and the world is changing so rapidly. Technology is changing so rapidly. Competition can come up on us so quickly that to spend a year putting together a business plan, by that time, the idea is null and void, right? Or you got a competitor there. So with the entrepreneurs I'm familiar with, and I think you fit into this, Cary, is the guy or gal that builds the airplane while they're flying it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think there's some components that you certainly need to have prior to that the business plan would help you uncover, right? You need to know who your buyer is. You need to know what your differentiator is. It amazes me how many people that you can ask that own a business say, why are you different from anybody else? And they don't really have a compelling reason. You need to have worked through your pro forma and your financials and with realistic numbers. So there's a lot of components to it that I think you need to do, but having it in a 20-page formal thing, not necessary.
Which is a lot of what is taught at the academic level, right? I know I was in certain classes that I took at university, and you do a lot of work with the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and some other volunteer things that you've done in the past with entrepreneurship. Where's that crossover between taking everything we've learned in a business course or business law course even, and deciding I want to run a business, I want to go to that next level? Is a business course enough? Is a business degree enough? What else would you recommend if it's not, if someone chooses to be an entrepreneur?
Well, from my experience, there's the gap that goes from textbook to reality, and I think that bridge, at least what I used as a bridge, was a mentor, and my mentors have come from personal connections, people I've met, people I've read about. One of the great ones I had was somebody I read all these articles about, and figured out he lived here in Kansas City, went and met him. And, he and I chat periodically and used to chat about once every 6 months and get together. But, you can also use, I'm a huge audiobook fan, TED Talk fan, podcasts. So I'm in many, not only online forums. So I'm in a franchisor forum, a staffing forum, an EOS forum, just hearing from different people. I'm in different roundtables. So I think that's the bridge that I've seen is most of the business plans that I reviewed from the academic side, they come with, I would think any seasoned entrepreneur would very quickly pick up on and say, hey, well, have you thought about this? And have you thought about this? Where maybe for some reason, the academic side or the professors, that's not a question they think of. It maybe fits the template and they're checking that box off, but whether it's the addressable market or buyer persona or differentiation or whatever it is, there's just some really, really big gaps that I've seen when reviewing some of those business plans.
Yeah, so many things to think about when you're building a business. So how does a franchise concept kind of mitigate that learning curve?
Well, it's kind of how I led off, right? You have somebody that's been an entrepreneur since 1998 that has probably stubbed his toe more than most people will ever do in their lifetime. And that comes from, screwing up relationships, people, leaders, subordinates, banking, insurance people, just all these different things that you don't know what you don't know. Fast forward 25 years later, and you can now hopefully package that into a system where you can help them prevent making some of those costly mistakes. that's kind of that learning curve is you've got a lot of wisdom, and that's another kind of bridge that we talked about with a mentor. You pick up a franchise um, opportunity and you have a team of mentors at your disposal. I don't think a lot of people, if they've been an entrepreneur before, they understand what it's like. If they've been an employee for 20 years and they're thinking about going out into business on their own, I don't think they understand the lonely journey as an entrepreneur, stepping in fresh snow every single day because you've never been, you have nobody leading the way, and you're literally looking around going, am I going in the right direction? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? I have no idea. I think it's right. Man, to have a team of people say, hey, the tracks have been laid. All you have to do is follow these. Just don't wander off. That's it's a huge benefit.
Yeah. I like that analogy of stepping in fresh snow, because the franchisor who has spent, like you said, sometimes years and thousands of dollars coming up with these systems, they've been the pioneers, they've gone that particular path, and now they're providing a bridge for that next group, in this case, franchisees. So I'm wondering if I could ask a personal question.
Sure.
That when you built many businesses, but the one I want to talk about for just a second is where you got to 100 million. It's a two-part question I have for you. Part one was why 100 million, right? What was that all about? And secondly, when you hit it, now what? What happened after that?
Good question. So, the $100 million mark, to be honest with you, I think it was a number I plucked out of the sky. I think I read an article one time and it was talking about, levels of business and, entrepreneurs that start out, if there's 10 million of them out there, X percent make it to $1 million, X percent make it to 5, X percent make it to 10. And when you get to 100 million, it was kind of that unicorn phase of very, very, very few ever get to that size. And for whatever reason, that was the number that I said, well, then that's what I want to go for. And my partner and I, James, we set out to do that. And one of the ways that we accomplished that was when the recession came in 09 and 2010, we did a pivot, and we, instead of kind of hunkering down like everybody else did, we actually did an acquisition, and we were in temporary staffing. And so we bought a payroll company and a PEO company. And for those that don't know PEOs, it's like Paychecks or Inspirity, somebody that basically does your payroll in your company and does your benefits and all that stuff for you. It's like outsourced HR. And to us, we thought, how different can it be? We do payroll, they do payroll. And in hindsight, 6 years later, when we finally hit that pinnacle, and looking back on it, it was like we were riding a bicycle and we saw somebody with a motorcycle and thought, oh, it's got 2 wheels and a handlebar. How different can it be? The complexity, the complications, the cost, it was, so to answer your question, we got to $100 million, and I think we did a high five and then said, okay, let's sell this business. This is awful. We did not like what we were doing on a daily basis. I had gone from sales and marketing and vision and entrepreneur leadership to banking, taxes, insurance, financial, that was not my world. And so we found somebody that was looking to buy and sold it off. It's now part of Paychecks, and we kind of retrenched and refocused back to our original core, which was the franchise model, and relaunched that late 2017. And when we started out in 04, it was, back then that wasn't around, but if you ask me now, what was your why? My why was to get to 100 million. Knowing what we know today, that's not really a why. That's really a result. And if Simon Sinek had been around back then, I think he would have challenged me and said, well, 100 million, but why? Why 100 million? I don't think I could have provided an answer to that.
Yeah.
So when we retrenched and said, you know what, let's sell that off and now let's rebuild again, we don't focus on numbers. We don't focus on units. We have them because the external world expectation whether you're talking to bankers or investors or potential franchise owners, they all want to know, hey, where are you going to be in 10 years? So you can't answer, we don't know, we don't care. So you do have to put some parameters around it, but we don't think about that. We don't lead with it. Our whole goal, our whole mission of why we exist today is to develop profitable units with happy franchise owners. Simple as that. And if we can accomplish that, the numbers, the financials, all that other stuff, the results, those will take care of themselves. And that's a much more fun thing to wake up every day and to think about what you're doing when you're working with owners and you're trying to get them to, profitability, and you're trying to get them to be a happy franchise owner. That's a lot different why than I want to get to 100 units or I want to get to 100 million. It doesn't really drive you.
That's amazing. That's incredible to have a why and then to sell off part of a company that is a lucrative part of a company because it just doesn't fulfill you. It doesn't make you happy.
Yeah.
I'm wondering like how many people out there have a why that they cling to, that they would rather be buried with than to pivot on their why or to change their why. Like, what would you say to those people?
I guess I would say if it's motivating you and driving you, and if you're excited to get up in the morning, you're excited to get to the office, and your time flies by and you lose track of time, then you're probably on the right why. If you're dreading, like I was 7 years ago, and you just could not stand the stuff you were doing on a daily basis, then you're either in the wrong seat on the bus or you're in the wrong why. Would be my guess.
This idea of happiness, right? To make sure that while you're chasing the dollars, you're also chasing what brings you joy, what brings you happiness. No doubt happiness to one person is defined a little bit different than it is to another person. But that idea combined, now you're going to work because you're doing both. You're chasing the money and you're chasing happiness. How would you describe, having gone through this business is heavy, I'm not enjoying it, it's lawyers and accountants and this and that, and I'm having to do battle and I'm having to figure out the other thing. And how would you describe happiness for yourself?
For me, it's what we just talked about. It's being in the moment. And to me, what I notice is when I'm in my groove, when I'm in my rhythm, you could either say time stands still or time flies, whichever way you want to look at it. But I cannot tell you how many times I look at the clock and I'm like, oh, it's 6:30 or it's whatever. It just, you lose track of time. You lose track of conversations. You can have a conversation like this and an hour goes by in a flick. So that's when I know that I'm in my moment and I'm enjoying what I do. And so for me, that level is, it's not striving. It's not, the happiness thing is not a pursuit, right? It's not trying to go out there and grab it. It's kind of like the end result, right? If I focus on developing profitable and happy franchise owners, I know that my revenue and my income and everything else, that will be a result of that. I know that will come as a result of that. My model proves it out. Economics proves it out. I know that. And in the same respect, I know that if I spend time doing things that I enjoy doing, things like this, I would much rather do this than to sit in a finance audit meeting that my CFO is doing right now. Audit financials are part of the franchise world, right? Got to do them every year. I don't have to do them. So, I get somebody else to do that. But if I'm in that moment and I'm excited about it, I'm enthusiastic, I'm passionate about it, the happiness is a byproduct of that. That's just, it is what it is to me. I don't feel like I'm out there chasing it.
Yeah. And I think that's also what you were talking about finding the right seat on the bus, like your CFO, who probably loves doing that stuff and is trained for that stuff. He's the one in that meeting. You're the one here on the podcast. So it's really about, right, finding the right person, the right seat on the bus.
Now here's let's dig into, take this and dive back, right? Go back to the academics discussion. So I don't think they teach you in the school is that, hey, that's great. That's an awesome looking org chart. But guess what? Day one, you're sitting in all the seats.
Yes.
You're doing it all until you can afford to bring on that CFO and do that. And so you're not always going to be doing everything that you want to be doing, because sometimes the financials don't allow it to do so. So I still sit in seats to this day that I think, man, as soon as we hit this other level, I'm putting a person in that seat. But I have my org chart sitting right on my wall right here, and I look at it every single day. And I'm, part of my goal as an entrepreneur and as the visionary of the company is filling those boxes on that org chart and develop.
And you went to school for organizational development, didn't you?
Organizational psych.
Organizational psych. So how did the two differ?
Mine is kind of right along Rebecca's side, right? That's what's always fascinated me. I never enjoyed the clinical side of psychology. I never thought of myself as being able to sit down and listen to somebody tell me about their problems. What I always thought was fascinating about psychology was how it related to, organizations, industrial, why people do what they do, and can you predict in a better way? And so that's one of the reasons why I'm such a huge fan of what Rebecca does, is because it's right in my wheelhouse. Back to passion and excitement. I could geek out on that stuff all day long.
Yeah. The Zarko profile. Yeah, I get it.
Me too. I can geek out on it. I love this concept of when we are fully present, and how often are we really, right? We're usually thinking, what's next? That next meeting, I got to prepare for that. That other thing is going to happen. I got to tell her this. Or it's rare that we are fully present. I know as I get older, I'm more cognizant of that. And I think I know this is between the two of us, right? Or three of us, I should say. I feel like time is running out, right? There's this sense of urgency. So I have learned I need to be fully present, whether it's with my grandchildren or a conversation. And I ask myself frequently, how much did I miss before? How much did I miss because I was so busy doing this or thinking about that or solving that other problem? How many conversations did I not fully engage in? Or how many times did I miss when somebody needed something from me, even if it was just a hug or something? So I don't want to harp on that, but you really hit a chord with me there, Cary, when you said this. You kind of know you're happy when time flies and when you're fully present. What a wonderful way to kind of just know, right, that we are there. And as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we need to remind ourselves, I think, of that.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. So, Cary, dovetailing off of that, I mean, no doubt the entrepreneur takes more risks than a franchisee does, because a franchisor has laid the foundation to things. But you've kind of mentioned a couple times that it's just the same kind of work. What other advice would you give, whether it's an entrepreneur or a franchisee who's considering going into business? What do you think they need to know before they go into business?
Well, it's going to be a very similar theme, and they'll kind of connect. So for an entrepreneur, you're going to want to find yourself a mentor. You're going to want to, go out there, whether it's on Facebook or somewhere, and you'll find some groups. Join a Vistage or find an industry specific roundtable of CEOs. And a lot of times hopefully you'll find some people that are maybe a little behind you and some that are ahead of you. So you're contributing on one side, but you're also gaining from the other. And I think that will really help you with the isolation of an entrepreneur in trying to figure out, your next hire, maybe you have 2 people in your office and you're trying to decide, should I hire a CFO or should I not? Am I to that stage or not? It's to sit around a room with 10 other entrepreneurs and say, hey, here's my situation. Here's what I'm going through. What did you do? And what did you do? And what's your advice? It's very powerful. And I know some of those cost money. Everyone that I'm in, except for the online ones, have a cost to it. But for the $10,000 to $20,000 a year, think about it like getting a fractional CFO, fractional CEO, fractional CIO, fractional. I mean, you get all this wisdom at your disposal. So that's what I would advise for a brand new entrepreneur. For the franchisee coming on board, it's the same thing, which is don't wander from the system and plug into the group that you already have there. You have a peer group, and then you have a leadership group. And remember, in most cases, I know some franchise systems have minimum performance requirements and minimum royalties, but no franchisor that I'm aware of starts out and says, you know what we'll do? We'll go out, let's get 5,000 franchise owners. And if we can just have them pay a minimum royalty, we'll be gazillionaires. That's not their goal. Their goal is for you to be the biggest, most successful office in the world so that you're successful, because that means they're going to make royalty. So why would they steer you wrong? And that's the biggest struggles that I have, is seeing people that come into our system knowing nothing about entrepreneurship, knowing nothing about staffing, knowing nothing about recruiting, and wander off into some space that we're like, what? So we always say, if you want to try something different, do it in addition to, not instead of.
Yes.
What we're telling you. In addition to, not instead of. That way, hey, you want to try postcard mailers? Fine, do it in addition to what we're telling you to do, but not instead of. Test it, come back, and if you say, hey, I did it your way and I closed 1 out of 100, I did it my way, I closed 1 out of 25, I promise you the franchisor is going to say, let's look at what you're doing. But if you go off and say, I'm not getting any sales, and you say, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing postcard mailers. We don't know anything about postcard mailers. We've never done them. I can't help you. I can't service you. Go back to what we told you how to do. We know how to do that. So, it's the same thing, right? Plugging into a network of experts and tapping those resources and just staying true to the system.
Therein is, I think, where the entrepreneur and the franchisee is a little bit different. The entrepreneur grows due to their creativity. They go from that stage 1 to stage 2 to, big, like what you've talked about, because of their innovation and creativity. But at the franchisee level, we want to be careful about not getting too crazy innovative and creative and not follow the system. The system is proven. So I think there's one distinction also that makes the franchisee and the franchise and the entrepreneur slightly different. So, so this is kind of a crazy question. When you look backwards at your life, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, when you look back, is there a place that you could say, either I regret doing that, or I regret not having done that, or the opposite, that I'm really grateful this person, this thing, this book came into my life and I listened or I made a certain decision, either a regret or some kind of epiphany that you may have had?
Well, I try not to dwell in the past. And so regret, I think, would probably be too strong of a word, but I think it's more learning, right? Is there something that you've learned that if you had to do it again, you would do differently? A little rephrasing on how that does. And of course, as any entrepreneur, there's going to be thousands and thousands of those. But in terms of epiphany, probably the biggest shift that I can recall was around the time that we had hit this magical, $100 million number. And at the same time, we had internal issues going on with staff. We had legal issues going on with partners. There was all this. So from the outside, from a numerical standpoint, you look at it, and anybody looking at it would say, wow, those guys are really successful. I wonder what they're doing. Internally, it was just chaos. And that gets back to my point of just not being in a place that I wanted to be. And I think the epiphany came where I was having this disagreement with one of my business partners. And he was a silent partner, he was an investor, and he and I just could not see eye to eye on a number of topics. It was just oil and water. And I had read, it's funny because it's not a business book, but it's The Seat of the Soul.
Oh, yeah.
And I had been on this chapter over and over and over, and I just kept reading this chapter about, and it was basically talking about, karma in instance, and making the conscious decision versus the unconscious decision. And if you make the unconscious decision, you just keep looping back, and the same people, the same instances, the same everything will just keep coming back in your life until you get it figured out, you get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw all these same personalities in my life that were causing me agitation.
Wow.
And I thought, I've got it figured out. Okay, here it is. Yep. And I remember it not changing for, I don't know, it must have been months. And I go back and I'm reading the book and I'm just not figuring this out. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm making the conscious decision here. They're fighting me and I'm not fighting back, and they're doing this and I'm being the nice guy and I'm doing this. And then I read one little passage in there that made all the difference, which was you can't fake it, right? When somebody says, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and you go, I know you're right. No, you're back in the unconscious. So once I made that turn and I really, truly was, acting from this place of understanding and compassion and empathy, magically sold the business, bought out the partners, people went this way, everything went this way, and it just literally dissolved. It felt like overnight. And that was a huge breakthrough. And I'll never forget, I was one of my mentors, actually. She was coaching me, and I was like, my mentality was always the bull. That's where the grit comes from. And I used to have this, was it marble? I think it was. I used to have this, I do a lot of paperweights in my office.
Yeah, I love those.
And I had this bull paperweight that I used to keep right here because that was me. If you want to mess with me, you're going to get it, because I am not backing down and I'm going to just be the bully. And that was my mentality. And I'll never forget. That all went away and everything kind of changed. And like a day after everything kind of settled down, it got knocked off my desk and it broke one of the legs.
Whoa.
And so I took that to my mentor at the time, who was a business, but she had a kind of a spiritual turn to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave it to her. I said, I don't need this anymore. And I gave it to her. That was huge difference. And so now I don't take that hardcore, fight you to the death kind of approach anymore. That was the old me.
Love that. The chills.
Me too, Trace.
Right.
Yeah. As you were talking, I'm hoping people are truly listening to the deeper part of this, because we do tend to repeat things again, and we keep attracting similar types of people or similar circumstances again and again until we figure out, what's the common denominator, right? It's us, and what's attracting this and holding this in place. And you figured it out. You got the epiphany through, in this case, a book and a coach, and said, okay, I'm going to change this part of me. And it changed everything.
Yep.
Everything.
Wow.
That's amazing. I hate to end this conversation I really do, because you've hit so many really deep things that I think we could go on and on. But as we're at the top of the hour, I want to make sure people know how to get hold of you, Cary, to learn more about Nextaff, more about you. How would they get hold of you?
So we have on the franchising side, it's Nextaff, NEXTAFF-franchise.com. And then for the client and the recruiting side, it's actually just nextaff.com. So we have two out there.
Perfect. Tracy, I'm going to put this in your court because you've been an incredible listener as I keep interrupting you.
I love you, Rebecca. You're the best. So, for me, it goes back to something that you said, Cary, a few minutes ago, where if you want to do something different, then take a step. And that even to me became like that aha moment, even with the whole bull story, where like you took that step, but like, look at how everything changed. That's amazing to me. So, I think for our listener, like, what is that one step that you're compelled to do something different or to go in a certain direction, but maybe it's not breaking down the door full force and charging at it. Maybe it is just, what's that one very next step that you can take, because you might be surprised at how many effects it has by taking just that one step. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm taking away a lot, including this idea of being more fully present. I've been better at it, but I'm going to get even better after this conversation, and to mix in a little more happiness in my day-to-day life. Cary, any final words from you? I really so appreciate your time.
Yeah. I appreciate the time. And, as we mentioned before, I mean, I enjoy doing these type of things. Time flies. Obviously, when I look down at the clock, I mean, time just went in a snap. So that tells me I'm doing what I should be doing.
Thank you. And you're a thinker like me. So this is so much fun. So for those of you listening in to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, we'll see you next week. Make sure to share this. There's so many big tidbits that you are going to benefit from and your friends will benefit from. So we'll see you next week on another episode.
Thank you.